was falling out all the time. She even said nightshade is good if you have a troubled mind. It's fine. She got bitter guma, cut out the kumba, sorosy leaf and devil whip, lime leaf, pear leaf, sour sap leaf from old Nachalang, and up in pickle thick, sweet mint, marigold, peppermint, fever grass, and the famous strong back root. John Charles, dippy milkweed, ackee bush, and the old time cheney root. She got black bush, elder bush, black pepper bush, poor man friend, donkey weed, pepper elder, oil mint, rat ears, consumption weed, rapambara and sarsaparilla. The man Congo tongue, Bim Zaga, and the late revival weed. In fact, the only one that she never had was the wicked ganja weed. Bush, black pepper bush, poor man friend, donkey weed, pepper elder, wild mint, rat ears, consumption weed, rapambara and sarsaparilla, the man Congo tongue, Bim Zaga, and the late revival weed. In fact, the only one that she never had was the wicked ganja weed.
Woman is sweeter than men. Woman is sweeter than men. But if a woman is sweeter than me, I'm gonna throw myself in the sea. Sing the chorus now. Woman is sweeter than men. Yeah. Woman is sweeter than men. But if a woman is sweeter than me, I'm gonna throw myself in the sea. Woman is sweeter than men. Woman is sweeter than men. But if a woman is sweeter than me, I'm gonna throw myself in the sea.
Now we're going to do for you Studio One again. This one is Occupation. Thank you. That one was occupation.
Mijn, oh mijn, oeh ik heb pijn, oh zo'n pijn tot over mijn oren smoor, verliefd op jou. Keer op keer stort ik weer neer, ik kan niet meer tot over mijn oren smoor, verliefd op jou. Veel te vrij, wat moet ik met een meisje zoals jij? Veel te vrij, je hebt niemand nodig tot over zijn oren smoor, verliefd op jou. Wow. Ik ben verward, voel eens mijn hart, gaat veel te hard tot
Check 1 2 check. It's on. Check. Can I get a... Oh, here. No, I just need this. You're speaking right after me, right? Okay. Okay. Hi. David Summers, yes. Oh, okay. Can you pronounce your last name?
Melvet.
Melvet.
It's like it was just Melvet.
Got it.
Yeah. Are you gonna do the?
I'm going to introduce people
Perfect.
and kind of lead it, yeah.
Good. Just trying to get a scope of the
But
land.
I'm going to go after
Fritz,
the father. I think, at 1, which is in 3 minutes. What I don't totally know is that he keeps telling me more things to remind them of, like, but whatever. He's like, the programs are there, the thing is there. I'm just going to say whatever I think. Yeah, go to the bathroom. Hey, appreciate it. Can't hurt. Oh, I got. It's 1 o'clock, should I? Bart. Hello. Okay. The mic works. Good afternoon, everyone. Quiet in the back, please. Thanks. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. This means so much to our family. I'm Daniel's cousin, David Summers, and I'm going to lead today's ceremony. Couple things. There are programs at the, Martin told me a couple things. Let me see if I can remember. There are programs at the front, and the way today is going to work is we're going to have a few speeches up front, a few formal speeches. We're going to have a little reflection, discussion, drinking period, and then we're going to open it to kind of an open mic for anyone who wants to say a few words about Daniel. You know, I've been trying to figure out for a while why I was chosen to lead this ceremony. And I think I finally figured it out. Our family wanted to save a few bucks on an officiant, so it's an honor. But I do want to emphasize that this is a celebration of Daniel's life. While he is gone far too soon, Daniel's life was not a life unlived. His life was full of music and art and family and friends. He won a Grammy, for God's sake. But the best evidence that he lived a life full of meaning and a successful life is all of you. He brought all of us together. You know, the first thing I think of when I think of Daniel is kindness. That's the first word I think of. I can't imagine a better legacy than that. I haven't heard all of the speeches that you're going to hear today, but I can assure you, everyone who speaks will mention Daniel's kindness. And by the way, if you're planning to speak today and you weren't going to mention it, just add a line in now. You still have time. I also am personally indebted to Daniel for the way he took care of my grandparents at the end of their lives. To this day, he would go to their graves on their birthday and leave flowers just to be close with them. If any of you were lucky enough to have Daniel visit you, your life was instantly improved. I remember once in high school, Daniel visited us in Maryland, and by the end of the weekend, he had fixed our heating system, stocked our fridge with fruits and vegetables, and restored an antique bird cage. A bird cage I didn't know existed, let alone required restoration. When my brother Tamler visits, on the other hand, it would take us a week just to get the house back to the way it was before he got there. You know, we had a plan. Martin, my mom, Trina, and I had a plan to invite Daniel to the East Coast for a week, spoil him the way he did us, take care of him the way he took care of us. We never got a chance to do that. I love Daniel, and I will miss him dearly. Thank you. Now we're going to have the siblings, Martin and Vanessa, come up, so please welcome them.
Thank you, David. I'm Martin, and my sister Vanessa. We'd like to also give a big welcome and thank everybody here. There's so many family members here and friends. It's so awesome to see so many of you. It just shows how much loved that he was. But I do think that Daniel would have hated this. You know, he's so modest. He never brags. He doesn't want to have any attention to himself. And to think that there are 200 or maybe even more people here and people online, I think he would have hated it. But on the other hand, I think it's fantastic that we're all here together, and I think it's important. The sibling relationship is important too, I think, and typically your longest relationship in your life. So you meet your wives and husbands and partners when you're older, you have kids when you're older, your parents typically tend to pass before you do, but the sibling relationship is your longest one. Dan, Vanessa, and I were always aware of the special importance of our particular sibling relationship because we grew up in two different places. In Southern California during the school year with our mother Louise, and then in Amsterdam during the summers with our father Fritz and with Carlene. And Daniel and Vanessa also lived in Hawaii and Massachusetts when I was already out of the house, so lucky them. Perhaps because we had nomadic roots as kids and as teenagers, we sought and found in each other, all three of us, security, stability, and unconditional love and friendship. I wrote this in my memorial, and I still believe it to be true. I cannot recall a single time when Daniel, Vanessa, and I have ever disagreed about anything. Our views on politics, culture, life, morality, have always been very closely aligned. We appreciated many of the same bands and movies, and we shared similar tastes of humor and progressive sensibility in politics and lifestyle. We were thick as thieves. We always had each other's back. Everyone here knows Dan was a prankster who would get this puckish glint in his eye before making a hilarious observation. And just being around so many of Dan's old friends today in the last few weeks, it reminds me of how much fun we had growing up, the siblings, and also with Iris and Jantine and with our parents, but also in recent years when we took camping trips together. We met at family reunions in Europe. The wonderful drive that Dan and I once did together from here, LA, up to San Francisco on the PCH. All the times I saw him play in bands with the Upbeat in Carpinteria recently, with Jimmy Cliff in Amsterdam, in Paris, where we also saw, of course, Liam and Zach and Jubal. And then most recently, I saw him play with Rancid in Baltimore. Our three, which was kind of a different sound than the other bands, but I'm not sure I really, okay, anyway. Our three-person WhatsApp sibling chat group was until just recently always full of jokes and photos and adventures and cool things we wanted to share with each other, which for Daniel often included pictures of impressive murals and installations that he was commissioned to produce all over LA. And our plans for the three of us to spend a long weekend together in New Mexico or Oregon coast. And now Vanessa and I have created a new group, one that is significantly quieter and less colorful, especially at this moment, although we're trying to see if Zach is willing to join it. That said, it was not always easy being Dan's older brother. He was always cooler, more popular, better dressed, and so much better than me in so many things, not only in art and music and cooking. Despite being 4 years older, I remember being in Topanga Canyon and Santa Barbara and wanting to hang out with his friends, these younger dudes, because they were better skateboarders and surfers, and they had a much better sense of style. And many of those friends, like Zach and Rick and Jubal, are still here today. When we grew up, our mom always insisted that our friends were always welcome to her home. She splurged every Friday on pizza takeout, which was a lot of money for us at the time. It was smart parenting, because not only did we feel like our friends were welcome in our home, including a few times when they did not have homes to go to themselves. She was able to keep tabs on us and who our friends were, and it helped keep us out of trouble. It's something that Trina and I try to emulate with our own kids. And Dan also suffered sometimes for being the younger brother. When we moved to Topanga Canyon in the early 80s, I was referred to as the Dutch kid. Daniel, of course, was the Dutch kid's brother. So Madoda used to love that. She thought that was hilarious. As teenagers in the 1980s, before there were smartphones and stuff, we had a lot of crazy adventures together as untalented breakdancers, slightly better snowboarders, inspired skateboarders, and wicked boogie boarders. And then in the summers, we would explore Amsterdam together and see Fritz and Caroline and Jantien and Iris, and we would hang outside of trams on the outside, much to our father's horror. And once with Dan, we were even chased by a police helicopter in the Netherlands for spray painting our names on a new bridge that was being constructed across the Amstel River. They still haven't caught us. And Dan's probably the only person who I know who unwittingly both jumped in the ocean when there was a shark and into a swamp where there was a crocodile. He was always up for an adventure, whether he knew it or not, and for so long was blessed with a halo right over his head. But as a teenager, Dan broke away and quickly carved out his own tastes. First listening to bands like Oingo Boingo, Michael Jackson, and the Stray Cats, and then fully embracing Madness and the Specials and the Selector and the straight edge ska culture. Self-taught, Dan started playing in bands and performed in bars when he was only in junior high school. Not sure about that one, Mom and Dad. He kept getting better, and he toured all over the world, often with the friends that he made, as a teenager. And with so many of you here who've played in all those bands, I think one of the beautiful arcs of Dan's life is that he quite recently toured and played with Roddy Radiation, who is, of course, the English musician who played lead guitar for the Specials, which was Dan's favorite band in junior high school. So I think that's a beautiful thing. Now, look, we all know about his immense musical and artistic talents and his successful business that he operated here in Los Angeles, where he enjoyed working every day with Bo Johnson while they were working on their art projects, Bo. But Dan was also more than that, and we often said in our family, to know Daniel is to love Daniel. Dan was the kind of guy who could never say no. He was always working, taking on new jobs, never had time to visit us, helping whoever asked for a favor, producing new projects, and going on countless adventures and scooter rallies with his buddies. Hive Crew, represent. Dan was a loving and super fun uncle to Thea, Nick, and Malik, and Nia. He also had a very special bond, as David mentioned, with our grandparents. And he said he moved to rural Massachusetts to go to college, but I think secretly he actually moved there to be near them and to take care of them in their old age. That's the kind of guy Dan was. That's how I remember him, selfless and devoted. In many ways, he took better care of others than he did of himself. Dan had a heart of gold, and his natural instinct was to protect people. 3 different women have reached out to us recently and said that Daniel protected them as a teenager. And he showed them the respect and kindness that not any other boys did. They still remember him for this. And they said he was their guardian in a very macho music scene that was sometimes unfriendly to girls. To be honest, as a father of a young daughter, it made for difficult reading. But we always saw Dan this way too. And it's comforting to hear it, but it's also heartbreaking because so many people cared for him so deeply. I know that Dan's longtime friend Jessica also knows that this world really needs more Dans and not one less Dan. And I'm almost finished. We've heard so many stories in recent weeks from so many of all of you here about how Dan volunteered to paint your house or a school, or he was an honorary uncle to your kids, or he took all this effort to be in your lives and to get to know your kids and families. And as I've been trying to make sense of all this the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've been wondering, what could I have done? What if I had been more present for Dan? And I wonder if he had realized how successful he really was and what a tremendous positive impact he had on all of us and how much we all loved him. Vanessa and me and our parents, Louise and Fritz, we all miss Dan so much. And we know the pain will never go away, but we're also so proud of Dan for all that he has achieved. And despite whatever struggles he has been experiencing recently, that he was such a gracious, talented, loving, humble, and righteous man with a heart of gold. His passing has left a massive crater in our family, one that we will never be fully able to bridge. But it gives us so much comfort that he was able to enjoy such a rich life in the time that he was with us. Thank you.
Can I put this here? Oh no. Tell me what. Ooh, sorry. Okay. All right, wish me luck, you guys. When considering birth orders, I would argue that being the little sister to 2 brothers is one of the greatest sibling formulas. So much of who we are is impacted by our siblings. And when you're the kid sister to 2 cool big brothers, it's almost an unfair advantage in society. Despite my mother, aunt, and grandmother's desperate hopes for me finally to be the kid they could dress up in huge lace collars like some kind of haunted doll, I only wanted to be like my brothers. I want to hang out with them. I want to dress like them in matching Adidas tracksuits. I wanted to listen to the music they did. And considering our 6 and 10-year age gap, probably annoy the hell out of them. I also might have been a little bit spoiled. Luckily for me, Martin and Dan have always been so sweet and humored me with most things. Like when they were both getting deep into graffiti, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and they helped me figure out my own tag. And it was mint because that was my favorite flavor of ice cream. And teaching this impressionable young mind, you can take literally everything you love and put it in your art. So if you think of Dan as funny or cool or kind or supportive, imagine what it felt like to be looking up to him as your big brother. It's not so much that I lived in his shadow as usually about 10 feet behind him because the dude was always walking so fast. You just had to try and keep up, and that never changed. I remember as a kid building my first shoebox diorama of some dinosaurs, and he showed me how to make a glassy lagoon with dried Elmer's glue and food coloring and an atmospheric sky by putting a little bit of blue transparent plastic. Both of us being lifelong makers, I've always loved having his input. Dan's guidance has also spared me at least a couple of regrettable stages. In elementary school, my friends were deep into boy bands like New Kids on the Block. And my brothers already had me on a steady diet of new wave and hip hop, so NKOTB did not stand a chance. As Dan entered his two-tone ska era, his little sister was not far behind. In 4th grade, I changed my instrument to saxophone because I hoped to someday play in a big brass section like he did. And he took me to buy my first pair of Doc Martens, and by 7th grade, I was devoted Rude Girl. The last year we lived in the same house, I was still in junior high, and as soon as he would leave in the morning, I would raid his closet. And I usually would steal a Pendleton shirt, which was obviously way too big, but I felt very cool. And I loved it when my mom would make him drive me to school in his super loud MGB, definitely making an impression. When I was in college, we got to live near one another again. I was attending UH Manoa in Honolulu, and he and Dynamic Pressure had all moved to from Santa Barbara to the North Shore. And there was nothing better than getting to bring my friends to their gigs or like a random show at a Thanksgiving potluck at the Pressure House. When I did a college exchange in Boston, Dan was helping my grandparents out in Western Mass. And as people have mentioned, he and my grandpa had a ton of fun together. They were really close. And they would print out transcripts of Seinfeld episodes and read them out loud together in sort of an experimental two-man play. I remember getting him to come to the city to join me for a Stereolab concert, and he slept over at my apartment that had like a lot of roommates. And it was just so fun to be older together and start hanging out like actual friends. The one thing I have no memory of, like Martin, is ever being in a fight with Dan. At least not since we were all kids, and he would like pummel me with moldy oranges from the garden. Or he also tried to convince me I was an alien, and it took like I held on to that for like much longer than I like to admit of like there being a possibility of that. Dan and I loved, as adults, talking shop on art supplies and perfect tools. We both highly recommend all the Penco products out of Japan, like especially the tape dispensers are like excellent. We love going hiking together in the Columbia River Gorge when we come to Portland, or the mountains in Santa Monica when we come here. Going out for ramen or tacos, sharing stand-up and politics, and our dumb jokes could last decades. And this might not be funny to anybody else, but it's something to me that when we were kids, our mom had an art rep in New York who would frequently call the house, and he would always begin, "Hello, this is Jerry, is your mother there?" And 30 years later, Dan and I still, when we'd call each other, we'd answer with, "Hello," and then, "Hello, is your mother there?" And he just had such an influence on who I am that it's no surprise we have so much in common. Here's the hard part. Thanks. Being in my trio of siblings is what makes me feel whole. There is a brazenness in feeling we get to keep people forever, that you'll be a team until the end. And losing someone this wonderful, like this excellent, it drives you crazy, wondering why, questioning whether there was something I could have done to keep him here. I will always keep the space he was supposed to occupy beside me. I'm going to keep talking to him and asking him questions and just hoping I have a sense of what he would think. I'm determined to carry on his sense of fun and curiosity and craftsmanship and care for others that he so beautifully exemplified. In the spirit of Dan, it's always a good time to put on a record, try to find the joke in any situation, take pride in your work, and show people you love them as many opportunities as you get. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin and Vanessa. That was beautiful, and this is harder than I thought. Now, please welcome Fritz Boer, the father of Daniel.
Thank you. Martin, Vanessa, seeing you standing here together, I think of the website that Darren built with so many pictures of the three of you. Daniel in the middle, big smile, arms around you. You two show us the gap that we love so much, Daniel. In the morning of August 6, Daniel took his vitamins. Half a day later, he took his life. Daniel not only took vitamins, he was very conscious of what to eat. And he carefully observed his lifestyle. The things you do to stay healthy and have a good quality of life. I, as all those who love Daniel, try to understand what happened in those few hours and what changed Daniel's view on life so drastically. But in doing this, I hit a glass wall. I just can't figure it out. It was so unlike Daniel to do this. I know that our inability to unravel what drove Daniel is not unique. Suicide is one of the least understood phenomena in psychiatry. So not being able to figure it out, I can only think of what happened as a fatal accident. A fatal accident in Daniel's head. What does it mean that Daniel's life ended a few days before turning 50? You can look at it in terms of quantity, but also in terms of quality. To illustrate this, let me take a step aside. My father died at the age of 51. I was almost 16. In terms of quantity, I missed a lot of father. But what he had given me qualitatively in those 16 years lasted a lifetime. Daniel died at the age of 49. I'm almost 80 years old. Daniel, in terms of quantity, cut himself and all those who loved him short of decades of valuable life. But let us look at what he gave us in terms of quality. Trying to find words for what Daniel has meant for me, for us, is an almost impossible task. When you're thinking of Daniel, ever since his childhood days, it changed your face. It made you smile. He was, to say it in Dutch, een lieve jongen. A dear boy till the last days of his life. This was also his vulnerability. He was so inclined to help, to accommodate, to be there for the other, that sometimes he bent over backwards, did not stand up for himself. Already at a young age, say 11 or 12, did we observe how this could put him in a difficult position. We would hear how he promised a friend, say Jeroen, to meet at 4:30. Then another friend, say Pieter, would drop by, who wanted to see Daniel at 4:45. And we heard Daniel say yes. When we said, Daniel, you just promised Jeroen, he would shrug his shoulders and more or less let things be. I'm afraid that this part of his personality never changed and made him vulnerable in social life with these self-induced, conflictuous situations. Daniel had some unique characteristic. He valued quality over fashion. And he wanted to palpate quality, to have it in his hands. So in building amplifiers, he preferred the original glass tubes, no transistors. As for recorded music, he disliked compact discs when they came to replace vinyl records. I used to brag that Daniel could turn 2 broken scooters, preferably Vespas, into one that was running. He was very much a self-made man who developed unique solutions for all kinds of problems, ranging from storing a multitude of organs in a small house to painting man-sized letters on walls. Daniel had a wide range of interest, of course from music, especially ska and reggae, also for architecture, nature, climate, politics, and much more. Always things that mattered. But don't misunderstand me. He certainly wasn't always serious. He had a great sense of humor, was unusually quick, and had an infectious laugh. A favorite story is about the record store, where he was working when two Dutch girls entered and felt free to make rude remarks about the customers and the personnel, as long as they did it in Dutch. When they came to Daniel to pay their merchandise, he helped them straight face in English. Until the moment they walked outside and heard him calling after them in perfect Amsterdam Dutch, "Hey, mazzel hè!" He was a dear son, grandson, brother, cousin, uncle and friend, as others have testified and will testify today. Making others happy the way he did certainly does not mean that he himself always felt happy. He could be stressed. He had a vulnerable self-esteem. And next to his attacks of migraine, sometimes suffered from negative thoughts. We know that he sought help and profited from it. But I'm afraid that Daniel did not want to burden others when he went deeper down in what he pretended was just a burnout. So when he told us sometimes that he was sometimes stressed, he was possibly covering up deeper and darker holes in his existence to protect us? Or was it another instance of not being able to read himself properly, to know what you want yourself, who you are yourself, rather than what others want from you, how others see you? All this, of course, is now haunting us. When we had seen that hand slipping away, we would have grabbed it. But we didn't see it, and maybe we couldn't have seen it. This brings me to my final point. I don't believe in a physical hereafter, but I find the term hereafter helpful and appropriate when used metaphorically. All of us sitting here, all those who are watching this memorial online, or will do so later on, know the experience that thinking of Daniel makes you smile. This we carry with us. This will last a lifetime.
Thank you so much, Fritz. Next, we have Daniel's youth minister, Ray Meltvet. Please welcome him.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I had something in common with Daniel. So when I was his youth director, I had a MGB GT, which I bought from the junkyard for $995. And to hear that he had one later, I think maybe I inspired him on that. So it was painted, remember Earl Scheib, $99 paint job? Earl Scheib, $99, gold, brown, copper, something. So that's what he saw at Malibu Presbyterian when he was in our youth group. So he was, that's how I got to know Daniel and the whole Yeah, we're good. So when I got to know the Boer family, we're just trying to figure things out in life. I was at Pepperdine across the street there, and during that time with them, and getting to know So getting to know their family and Louise's way of having that open house with all the kids that'd always be there. We actually started a charity back then, and which still goes on to this day, and the boys were part of it. Vanessa, I think you were too young, and they would have arrested you and kidnapped you in Mexico. But we were building houses in Mexico in the hills, first in the Tijuana dump. Literally just delicing kids' hair, and Louise would let the boys come down with us. I drove an old school bus that someone was stupid enough to lend to us, and they had no license. We just drove the bus down and went down for the day and deliced kids' hair, and then from there started building homes, which still to this day we do, called Club Dust. And so for her to release her kids into our care, my care as a don't know what I was, 18 or 19-year-old kid at Pepperdine, was amazing. And her belief that community is important, and her belief that you share and that you give is what made Dan who he is today. The fact that she believed that curiosity about spiritual things, understanding that life is not just flesh and bones. Flesh and bones is what is here, right? And we all know that there's more to it, much more to it. And her belief was that it's important for the kids to determine and learn and be curious and find that other part of life, discover what the spiritual part of our existence is, which we know is where Dan is today. He's not with us in flesh and blood, but we know he's here today. There's no question that he's right here. And that as we are together, and as you live your lives forward, affected by him, like I am, you'll continue to live. Her decision to have that house the way that she did, and then to move to Santa Barbara because Topanga Canyon was a mess, which it was, and to want better for her kids, and thus introduce Dan and Vanessa and Martin to the group in Santa Barbara that taught him the love of the ocean and surfing and music, and all of what I'm learning happened between when he left my world down there and who you all are today, having been affected by him. It has been a wonderful journey for me to understand how important our lives are, that as we choose to interact with each other, we affect each other. Louise's way of teaching her boys and Vanessa how to live and to be inclusive and to be vulnerable and to be creative, I think more than anything, Dan's world as I see it, and I remember years ago Martin sent me, I think, did you send me a book of his tagging overseas? And all I could think of was, isn't that what people go to jail for? And you're like, no, he gets paid for it, he's so good. So I thought, holy cow, to realize that creativity and to make a life of what he loved. And then to see you all show up today. And do I call it scooters? Is that what it really is, scooters showed up today? To have you all show up back there was remarkable. To realize the community that he's part of and what he chose to be part of and what he created and what you welcomed him into changes all of us then going forward in life, the spiritual part of what we have. Even though we know that he's not here physically, there is still that other part. So as I think of their family and I think of Dan's experience in life, I would encourage you and myself learning from it to choose to be vulnerable, to choose to reach out to people that you may be thinking they're wobbly. You may be feeling yourself some darkness coming on. And that we wouldn't think, as I think Dan must have thought, that he would be a bother if he shared that with him, with us, right? That he thought somehow it had to be kept inside. And I would hope that we would be inspired or changed by what has happened to reach out to those around, to say that we love them, and to say to others, I need help. I need a touch, I need a hug, I need a place to crash tonight, I need a beer or a coffee. I need that, and it's okay to say that. And we only wish that he had done that. In his own mind, we know that he was protecting us. He was keeping us from that questioning that he was going through. And now the best thing we can do, the best thing I can do is to know for my own kids and for each other to reach out and to be that vulnerable both in asking and receiving. And I would hope in that way that we honor Dan the best we can. So I love you.
Thank you, Ray. Next we have Daniel's dear friend, Zach Pike.
Zach Pike in the house.
Hey. Oh, hi, everybody. Magic and alchemy. I'm going to get back to that later. But magic and alchemy. I hadn't thought of Dan protecting us, but that makes complete sense to me. It just dawned on me those words make total sense. Unlike Martin and Vanessa, I have gotten in fights with Dan. Usually over something silly like, should it be this kind of Papa Top? Should it be a John Crow? I don't know. What do you think? No, man. So that's how it's going. I met Dan in the fall of 1987. We both rode the number 5 city bus that took the kids from the Mesa to Lacunda Junior High. Lacunda? Dan's family lived about 4 blocks away from the house I grew up in Santa Barbara. We were what was known then and probably now as Mesa Rats. We were like the beach billies, you know. Coastal country kids. It was a good time. Dan stood out. He had a pretty hip Tony Hawk Bones Brigade era haircut with the hair down the front of his forehead, and he wore these bright colored t-shirts that were spray painted across the front and the back that he did himself, and they looked amazing. And he looked like he was ahead of the game. He looked like he knew something that nobody else did. He was clued in. He was cool. Dan's family was cool. His house on Hudson, then later on Edgewater, became the headquarters for our group of friends. Louise kept a home that was warm and loving and full of music, art, and interesting people. An average evening at the headquarters would be spent with a group of friends drawing graffiti, sketching, reading art magazines, music magazines, and listening to the latest mail order record that came in to pick it apart and see what made it work. And lots of pizza, never-ending pizza and Cokes. That's what drove the nights. Coke-fueled nights. If you were lucky, Martin would stop by and critique whatever you were working on, because we valued his opinion, and he was, okay, that's whack. Kind of fresh. We all looked up to Martin. The garage was a think tank. There was always a mission to be completed. We worked on scooters, we worked on cars, tinkering on everything. Dan always seemed to kind of know what made it work. He fired anything right up. And then one day he got a hold of an organ, a Vox Continental. He had played trumpet and trombone before in CIA, which a lot of members are here today. Yeah. And also the only band I ever got kicked out of. So the garage also became the jam room. And there were more missions. Ahead. Two things that I know about Dan, two things that I know that Dan was born with were a fantastic sense of humor and the ability to live completely in the present moment. They were non-stop jokes. He made them up as he told them, and some of them were pretty good. One time we were driving through the main street of Santa Barbara one morning to get coffee before work, and there was flyers posted a mile down the road, and you could see them every 20 feet. There were these bright green flyers for a lost dog. Somebody lost their dog, and the kids were like, you gotta find the dog. So they made like 1,000 flyers, and they posted them up all over the neighborhood. And we were looking at it incredulous, like, wow, these are amazing. And Dan, the ever collector of folk art, got out and collected some of the flyers. I got back in the car, and he called the number and he said, hey, I'm really sorry about your dog. You know, I'm super sorry, I don't know anything about that, but if you ever want a job, we have a band, and if you want to hang flyers for our band, like, we love your work. It's amazing, you know? I was just crying tears, I couldn't believe it. And if Dan was calling you, there was a good reason. He had a heart of gold. There was likely a mission to help someone in need, and he was calling out for support. He was calling out to find what resources he had and make whatever needed to happen. It's the kind of guy he was. Dan got me out of trouble. He also got me into the trouble, but he also got me out of it. Dan was fun. It was fun. We had a good time no matter what was happening. If there was trouble somewhere, he could find it. I spent 24 hours in a jail cell in Amsterdam because of Dan. It was the greatest day of my life. Dan possessed the three things that make an artist great. Dan had vision, Dan had natural talent, and Dan was dedicated to his work. He was constantly creating, always, all the time. It was yet another mission in his life. He had a deep understanding of how both light and how perspective worked, and he knew how to manipulate them and bend them. He really could see past what was in front of him. And I think that broadcasts to all aspects of his life. He could see past what people were thinking. He could see past what art he was doing. He could see in multidimensional, fractional thought. He knew how to manipulate it. His style of painting and design work held a sophisticated simplicity. It was a genius, really. He was trying to discover what was important and what was... Well, they say that modern art, the sophistication of modern art is when you strip everything away that's not necessary. And then you come to what's necessary. And he could see that right away. He worked at light speed. And it's my good luck to have spent the amount of time that I have had playing on stage or in studios with Dan. He was a star on stage and a sage off stage. He would play a set with a famous musician and then spend the rest of the time chatting with all the local cats, giving them tips, giving them advice, talking music with them. You got to check this out. Hey, do this, do that. Here's some, He was selfless, completely selfless. He could pick up any instrument and make it sound good. He played the trumpet, the trombone, the keyboard, and he had started playing the guitar recently, which scared the heck out of me. Because I was like, what am I going to do? I once saw him win spontaneously a beatbox competition. Brendan can attest to this. Brendan, it was the Western Regional Conference of Breakdancing and Beatboxing, and he signed up in his windbreaker and his thrift store slacks, and he went up there, and everybody was like, what? And he just destroyed it. He even did the Fat Boys thing, like the clapping, It was wild. I was like, wow. Took home the trophy. And as Martin said, Dan's worldview was much in line with my own as well, so we just let the music talk mostly. And one of my most cherished things about Dan is that we could communicate without speaking. We had like half grunts and references of records 10 years ago and funny things that happened or the feeling, and you could communicate with him on a different level. And I never thought about that before, but it's something that's breaks the language barrier. It's a creative language, and he pioneered that. He pioneered that in my sphere. Last Saturday, I was sitting with Louise, and she was telling me of Gestalt psychology practice and how the whole of something can sometimes be a greater conclusion than some of its parts. So I'm thinking of all these memories of being around Dan, and I'm letting him float around in my mind, and I'm thinking of how he lived his life on his terms and how he saw things to be in his beautiful vision. And I'm thinking of how he lived each moment to its 101% fullest. And I'm seeing his life as a masterpiece. All of these missions that he took and that we took with him having a common thread of putting out a magic into the world. And a good friend of mine was talking about theology and magic and giving and being selfless and putting into the world what it needs. And I see this magic all around me right now, and the people here in the world that have love for Dan Boer and all that he lived for, and that all he stood for, and all he meant, and that lives on. It doesn't stop, so it's part of the fabric of our being in this sphere. So I'm grateful for Dan's friendship. I'm grateful for the laughs, the endless laughs. I've got laugh lines probably. I probably look crazy from it. I laughed half my life. Guy could deliver a punchline like a wet paper bag. And the adventure. And I'm grateful for Dan's family, Martin and Louise and Vanessa and Fritz, for having such a wonderful son. I mean, I can't imagine life without him in my life. I'm glad to have known him. And my friend and all my friends, as I grow older, they become my heroes. And Dan is my hero. He's my hero. And the last thing I want to say is Dan Boer lives.
I love you.
Thank you so much, Zach. And next, Rick Revel, Dan's good friend. There he is.
1, 2, 1, 2. It's a tough act to follow. I don't have anything written down. I'm going off the dome, so be prepared for that amount of kilowattage. Thank you, Vanessa, Martin, Luis, for putting me up for all those years. Endless pizza nights and Coca-Colas and drawing in the room. And, although they were formative years, teenage years, great years. We listened to a lot of, 1988, that was the high point of German ska and a lot of tubas, a lot of aggro skanking, and we were very much into that, but for some reason we stole a record out of Martin's collection. It was Boogie Down Productions, Criminal Minded, the acapella version, and for whatever reason we played that over and over and over again, just coloring in his room. And his mom and pop in, you're like, oh, you cute, you guys are coloring. We're like, these are black books. We're doing graffiti pieces. It's not coloring. And but yes, we will have some Cokes and some Domino's pizza, thank you. And so pretty hardcore. A lot of very boring summers that were awesome. Skimboarding, body surfing, skateboarding, and all the great things that made living in Santa Barbara great at that time. So I just want to thank you guys for that. It's a very special time. Obviously Dan, very creative person. I was talking on the way down here. There's a whole world of graffiti people that have no idea that Dan played music. And a whole world of music people that had no idea that Dan made graffiti. And on top of that, there's a whole world of people that, just knew Dan as an illustrator and a sign maker. And so, he dipped into all these different worlds. And I'm blessed to have seen them all. He was a great inspiration for me. He'd always push me to learn an instrument. I'd be like, I'm too old. I'm like 18 years old. I can't pick up an instrument now. And he'd be like, it's easy. Pick up something like the guitar, like Zach. It's easy, And I'm like, nah, I can't do it. And then, he'd only played playing the trumpet at the time. And I seen him get an 18-inch children's Casio. Ran on D batteries. And learn every Upsetter song and Prince Buster song. And pretty soon he bought a Hammond and he bought a Vox and he had all these organs and he was playing in bands. And I'm like, fuck, I should have learned to play the guitar so I could play around with my friends and hang out, having all this fun. And he was a great inspiration in that way. And, I'd be like, oh, that girl's too pretty. He'd be like, she's not, dude, you can talk to her. You can do that. And he was wrong, of course, but he was always pushing me in those sorts of directions, and he was just a great guy, and he had this uncanny ability to make things happen. The band The Roots came and played in Santa Barbara. They were kind of starting, but it was a sold-out show. He's like, we should go down and see The Roots, and I'm like, we don't have any money. He's like, let's just go see. I'm like, see what? We don't have any money, and it's sold out. And he's like, we'll just go down, check it out. What? So we did. And we're staring at 3 giant bouncers and a guy ripping tickets, and they're sold out show. And I'm like, see? He's like, just hold on. And instantly there was this ruckus at the door, a fight or something, and all 3 bouncers turned their backs to go address the fight. And Dan said, let's go. And we just walked right in, And another 10 years down the road, I used to do the Imaginary Chalk Festival at the Mission. And I I would flail at it. It was hard work in the sun and no shade, and you're on your hands and knees for 3 days in a row, getting sunburned, and it was awful. And I'm like, Dan, I'm flailing at this. You got to help me, you know. Like, I got another square this year my sister paid for, and he's like, yeah, let's do it, you know. And so we're doing it, and about 8 hours in, he's like, this sucks. I'm like, yeah, I know. And then, you know, he's like, do they give you free beer? I'm like, no. And he's like, do they give you lunch, like a lunch plate? I'm like, no, you get nothing. And he's like, they should give you free beer. I'm like, I know. And he's like, let's go ask if we can get free beer. I'm like, what? And this is like Santa Barbara. You know, they charge for everything. You know, the beers were like $12 back then, and we had zero money. So he's like, if we go up looking like we're artists, let's just see what we can do. And we walk up, and there's these sweet old ladies, and he's like, do artists get free beer? And they look at each other like, who's this guy? And they're like, I don't think so. And they're looking at their clipboard. They're like, no. And he's like, I think that they should get free beer. And she's like, yeah, you're kind of right. And she filled us 2 beers. And so we went back all weekend long, endless beers. And the lady's like, he just charmed the pants out these old ladies. And for the next 3 years I did the Chalk Festival with Dan, it was the same ladies working the booth. And they were like, we recognize you guys from last year, and they would just flow the beers. And so that same weekend, the first weekend, he's like, it'd be nice to get some lunch. And I'm like, yeah, but we're pushing the luck on the lunch, you know. And he's like, let's just go see. So we roll up and work in the chicken barbecue. It was our good friend Ian and Trevor Zealot's father. Shout out to the Zealot family if they're here. And he sees us coming from a mile away, and he's shaking his head. Oh, no, you don't. Get the fuck out of here, you know. And Dan's like, come on, Donnie Z, you gotta break with the chicken, man. We're starving. And he's like, no way. And I'm like, come on, Dan. It's, you know, good to see you, Don, but you know, it was worth the try. Donnie Z goes, get him some plates. And for the next 3 years, we had free chicken and free beer the whole time, and that was great. And I could blather on and on and on about epic stories of Dan Boer, Jedi mind tricking his way into all kinds of different things, you know. And oh yeah, I skipped over this important story. I've only been to jail twice, and both times were with Dan Boer. And the first time, me and Dan had only known each other about a year, and we went out to a UCSB, and Martin was painting this seawall. There was like this wall that was derelict, and you know, college students would paint like a pot leaf on it and stuff like that. And we went out there, and he said, my brother Martin is painting a piece on this wall that nobody cares about. I'm like, you can just do it in the daytime? He said, oh yeah, they got a radio, they got lunch, you know, they're out there just relaxing. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So I go out there, we see Martin, I meet Martin for the first time, and I'm like, this is awesome, you know? And Dan's like, we should do something here. I'm like, yeah, it seems to be nobody cares, you know? And so next weekend we go out there with paint, and we are finishing up our pieces, and a cop comes up, and Dan gives him a wave, like, hey. And he's like, well, how are you guys doing? And Dan's like, doing pretty good, you know? And he's like, well, you're spray painting, like, you didn't even run from me. And we're like, yeah, like, what's the problem? And he's like, well, I'm kind of mad that you didn't run from it. He wasn't happy with us at all. And yeah, he said, howdy, boys, that's right. And so he took us to jail. And on the way in, the cop right over, Dan, it's very important that he leaned over to me, he said, hey, I'm going to whip up some tears. I'm not really crying. He was like, yo, like, this is acting. I'm like, okay, but maybe they'll let us go. I'm like, I look at him like he's got 3 heads. I'm like, Dan, they're not going to let us go. We're already in the car, you know? But he's like, he does this terrible acting job of crying. He's trying to, like, blink a lot to make tears. The cop can't give 2 shits. He takes us into jail. He gives us the whole scared straight thing, fingerprint, you know, dresses us down, all this stuff. And Dan's starting to get kind of fed up, so he kind of starts back talking to the guy. And then they call my mom, and they called Louise, poor Louise. Shout out, Louise. And then the cop pulls my mom aside and says maybe I should find a better category of friend, but you know, impossible to do. But for years after that, when Louise had introduced me to her friends, she would say, this is Rick. Rick's mom's a lovely lady who I met in jail. And that was always fun. And second time, in broad daylight, Dan may have wrote on a wall. And I said, Dan, what are you doing? It's daylight. There's a lot of people around. He's like, no big deal, you know. We'll just pull the Dan Boer Jedi mind trick thing. And I'm like, okay, I guess. And then the cops come, and they're like, freeze! And they're freaking out. You know, us and, you know, we have no paint on our hands or anything. And, you know, Dan had chucked the marker or whatever. And they're like, we know what you wrote on that wall. And we're like, no, we don't know what you're talking about and everything. And she's like, we have special equipment that can test the ink on this wall and test the ink on your fingertip and match them up. And I'm like, what? And then Dan just starts busting up laughing. He's like, no, you don't. And so that makes the lady mad. So then she runs our IDs, and I had an unpaid parking ticket. And that went to warrant because I was broke and stupid. And so I went to jail, and I sat in the back of the car looking at Dan. He was like, sorry. So it's good times, good times. But there really is no, there really was no better person to have known in my life, you know, besides Zach. Sorry, shout out Zach. But the three of us were very tight, and he really was just magic, you know. You know, I can't even, I think I've spoken enough. I could just go on blathering, and I'm going to lose it if I sit up here any longer. But God bless Dan Boer, my brother, and God bless you all for showing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Next, we have a man who always pays his parking tickets, Jubal Molitor.
Thank you, David.
Wow, tough acts to follow here. So much love in this room, and those guys know Dan even better than I probably, you know? When I met all these guys, I was just out of high school, and they were still in high school. And like, we're trying to start a band, you know? And they're, you know, CIA was a thing before I came on the scene, and those guys are doing great. I used to see them, like, in IV and stuff. But, you know, we became great friends over the years. And so, like, just want to say a few things about Dan. He was industrious, kind, and thoughtful. Dan projected an eternal optimism. Tammy T of the Jimmy Cliff Band once said, "Don, you walk like a rude boy." And Dan always got a kick out of that. But it's true, Dan taught us all how to walk like a rude boy. As the saying goes, a rude boy walks on the tip of his toes. As much as Dan was a sweetheart, he was also streetwise. He was telling us about the Little Rascal statue in Amsterdam. I don't know the exact Dutch, the little darling or whatever of Amsterdam. It's a brass statue of a city kid that was always up to mischief and represented the spirit of Amsterdam. He loved to teach us about the Dutch and Amsterdam culture, you know, the salty licorice and everything. Like, to this day, still enjoy that. But there's so many people that should be up here speaking. All of our old roommates from West Victoria, all the old Cognac guys, and the Mesa people, the old house on De La Vina and Figueroa, Dan's friends from Western Massachusetts. I don't know if there's anyone from there, but you know, I know he had some good friends from Greenfield College. All of Dan's friends from Hawaii, all of Dan's mates from Amsterdam, Sunk and all his other friends that he introduced us all to. Sorry. I can still hear his laughter, even when we're on we're always in on some stupid or clever joke. I guess it was a thing for us all to laugh at human nature, never to disparage or belittle, always to marvel and bemuse. Of course, there's an awful void left by his absence, and I still can't believe he's gone. I had a dream the other night that we were hanging out, and he had one more day, and I had a sense of dread mixed with a tiniest bit of hope that he would just stay with us. Accepting reality is tough when your whole reality is based on someone being there. We can only hope for better ourselves by being more like Dan and his giving spirit. Keep his memory alive by keeping in touch with each other. And the next time you're doing your own project, you know he'll be right there next to you saying, "No, do this," or "Yeah, do that." He's that feeling in your gut that says, "That's dope," or "That's whack." A voice motivating you to finish a project and keeping your mind open to the next project. So many things that he would say if he was here. So many things that I know that he's already said to us if we can just remember them and write them down and keep them in our hearts.
Being with Dan was being at art school. He was always working on a new drawing or design, always had a new book or record that would inspire us. Sorry guys, not used to fumbling papers in front of people. Yo. Sorry if this is too long. For most of us, this represents a new phase in our lives. There's no greater pain than the loss of a loved one. We must find the strength to carry on those inevitable. We must carry on in a different way. Through kindness and charity, such was the way of Daniel, spending time and energy and attention on people. I would like to share a small story. In the late 90s, I was couch surfing at Dan and Brendan's apartment on Cannon Perdido. And there's a parking lot with all the little kids used to play tag and baseball. And the trash enclosure was always overflowing with mattresses and food scraps. One morning, Dan just went out there and cleaned the entire enclosure. Just got a broom and just cleaned it up, threw everything in the trash. And since I was the one couch surfing, I followed suit, you know, and so I started cleaning up the trash enclosure so all those kids could be out there and playing in a clean, healthy environment. And, you know, it made our community a little better place, and I always admired that about Dan, and that was the way he lived his life. In my early 20s, I was working at the airport, and I was talking to Dan about career in the airlines. He's like, nah, it's way better to have a career in the arts. And it always stuck with me, and that's probably from, you know, the graciousness and wisdom of his family. I have a lot of regrets in life, but my greatest regret is not spending more time with Dan. And I think that goes for a lot of us and all of us. Regardless of what Dan was doing in his life, he left too soon. There are too many that loved him and cared for him, so many that he loved and cared for. Ever the constant artist and musician, I don't think he ever slowed down. From a teenager in Amsterdam to our bandmate on the Mesa, to roommate on the West Side, adventure on the North Shore, partners in crime in Western Massachusetts, and the Jimmy Cliff Swing Club in Europe. We all got super tired of just going from hotels to buses, and we're like, let's go out and swim. Let's go get in these creeks and rivers and get some exercise. Yeah, Liam was there, and. He was so many things to say about Dan, but you know, he leaves a void so large in our lives it's hard to think about. All we have is each other to remind us of our time on this earth with our amazing friend. Dan was industrious and wise in no small part because of his loving family. I remember he used to get awful migraines at band practice, and he wasn't in his right mind. He would say, "Guys, I'm sorry, I wish I could take it back." He would never wish suffering on any of his friends or family. When we remember his spirit, he is the one beyond saying, "Guys, I love you and I miss you." Dan would have made a great father, but one thing I can say is he mentored so many in the arts, music, and life. I recently got in touch with our old friend of ours, Joel Tarman, and Dan mentored him when he was much younger, and he became a musician, and now he helps troubled kids in Oakland. So he really made a difference in more ways than one. Dan's greatest success is one that we all strive to achieve, to actually leave this world better than when we found it. Brother, you are always missed and never forgotten, and I love all you guys.
Thank you, Jubal. And next we have a dear friend of the family and someone very close to Dan, Jessica I. Romelu.
How do I put this? There we go. This is surreal. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Dan and I met in Santa Barbara while I was a student at UCSB, right when I returned back from some time abroad in South America, which was the spring of 2004, so over 20 years ago. We stayed together for most of my 20s, for nearly 8 years, and he was my first love. Oh, okay. It was a one-of-a-kind love because it was my first, and I was young, and there's just nothing like being in your 20s. It was a period of my life that I just can't share with anyone else but him. The first night we met, through a mutual friend, I somehow ended up alone with him. I don't think I offered, but he asked me for a ride home and I agreed, so we got in my car. At the time I was driving my mom's Camry, and I guess I had a Snoop Dogg CD in rotation. So when I turned the car on, a Snoop song immediately came on, and it came on loudly. And it's funny because I didn't really listen to Snoop, so I was sort of embarrassed, but Dan was like, yeah, and he was so impressed. And so I instantly knew that we had a connection. But I still had my guard up. I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep seeing him because he was older and different in a way that I couldn't quite place. But he was persistent and kept making me these wonderful mixtapes on burned CDs with music I had never heard before that suited my tastes. He had figured out my style and what I liked right away. It didn't take long for me to see that not only was he handsome, funny, and had good taste, but also brilliant and talented to a degree of genius. Being with him was like slowly discovering the contents of a mystery goodie bag. At first, it was the mix CDs. Then he beatboxed to my high school friend's freestyle, whistling at an extremely high octave. And my personal favorite, busting a drawing of SpongeBob to near perfection on an Etch-a-Sketch in like 5 moves of his wrist. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like perfect SpongeBob on an Etch-a-Sketch. It was like insane. Speaking of SpongeBob, one of the sweetest things he did for me, and to this day I still think about it, was when I had the flu and I was sick in bed. He came home with DVDs of every season of SpongeBob that he rented from the Movies and More that was once by our house. It's no longer there. He just knew me so well, and I could truly be myself around him. We used to make up songs about our cats, make up sweet but weird names for each other, and we used to make fun of each other a lot. We could diss each other pretty hard, and neither would get offended. There was one diss, though, where he took it too far, and I'm still offended by it. He told me that I looked like I could be Sylvester Stallone's daughter. That one was just like too real for me. I don't look like I'm related to him, Dan. I mean, do I? Even after we broke up, we would still make fun of each other in a playful way. One night, I was walking towards Blum Gallery to see our friend Henry Taylor's show with my friend Samantha. And Dan was walking down the street in the opposite direction. And this was the first time I had seen him after we broke up. And I was wearing brown and black striped wide-legged pants. And as soon as he saw me, he yelled, "Pinocchio!" And we all just started laughing. Our breakup was hard for me because I didn't just lose a boyfriend, I lost my best friend and the older brother I never had and always wanted. Our relationship transcended just a boyfriend-girlfriend status. He also felt like my spirit guide and my protector, and I loved his family. My family loved him. It was hard for me at first to navigate the world without him. I feel like it felt like I had lost a big part of myself. He was also my greatest teacher and mentor. I learned more from him than from those 4 years at UCSB. I am who I am because of him. I don't know if he realized that the person I had become towards the end of our relationship was different than the person he met because he helped me discover who I really was. He was like an angel that the universe brought into my life. He had angelic qualities, as we all know. He always did more for others than he did for himself. He was a hypersensitive soul, which made him such a talent as he could almost touch and extract the meaning of something and decide he wanted this to flow out of his hands, and it could happen. In other words, there wasn't anything that he couldn't do if he just put his mind to it. Over the past several years, we didn't communicate as much, but whenever I needed something like an ombre fade on a plastic chair for a photo shoot, he would respond to me immediately, spray paint spray paint the chair, and even help me source it. He always went above and beyond for me, even after our breakup, and I took this for granted. I always felt secure knowing that he would still be there if I ever needed him, and now he isn't. This will be very hard to accept, and this is now the second time where I've lost him, and now in a permanent way. But I know that he is in a special place now where the angels go, as he truly was an angel walking on this planet, a planet that I don't think was truly worthy of him. And now he can finally take care of himself. And everything that he taught me, I hope to teach to my son, Julian, who inherited Uncle Dan's little rap band keyboard and upright piano. So those will go to good use. And all his wisdom, stories, and humor will continue living on through all of us, and the memories he leaves behind won't be forgotten. And I want to thank his family and close friends who have kept me in their close circle this past month so I didn't have to mourn alone. While I didn't want it to be under these circumstances, it's really nice to see everyone again, because I've missed all of you so much, and I love all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Now my brother has to follow that. Daniel's nephew, Nicholas, who's here, he used to say how much he loved spending time with the 4 Ds, the 4 Uncle Ds, David, Darren, Daniel, and Damler. My brother and Dan's cousin, Tamler Summers.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I'm just kind of amazed by all of this. I am, David's brother. I'm the guy the anti-Dan. He fixes, improves the house, I fuck it up. So the key was to invite Dan after you invite me, not before. Such a beautiful event. So many people who loved and respected Dan. Talking to Vanessa and Martin afterwards, and even they were surprised. As someone said earlier, he had all these parts of his life that people didn't know about the other part, and even his closest friends and family were not fully aware just the magnitudes, the extent. We all knew he was super talented. We all knew he was just like the nicest, kindest soul in the world, and that he had a rich social life. But the extent of it, I don't think anybody knew. Or at least a lot of us didn't, and it's how, I was trying to think of how that could be, but then it's kind of obvious, it's been said. Dan was not a self-promoter, in a world where everyone is relentlessly touting their brand and their accomplishments and just a vacation or something like that on social media. Dan didn't do any of that. It's a little like Jessica said, it's like the world wasn't good enough for Dan in that way. And it's just, it's just so beautiful to see everybody. As Martin said, maybe Dan wouldn't like it, but I think we all really appreciate it. Last thing, or the second thing I want to say, Martin mentioned that Dan was a prankster, which I'm surprised that everybody knows that he was such a prankster. I was only witness to one real prank, and I thought I would just end telling it. It also took place at a memorial service. A memorial service that's a celebration, like this is a celebration. A lot of people are gathered for it. It was a memorial for Dan's grandpa, Opa Ken, who Dan was obviously very close to. Both grandparents did so much for them. And now we're all gathered, and it's a drinking event, and it's also around Easter, really nice. 2 of the people who came we knew as Bob and Bob. They were relatives, cousins, second cousins, uncles, something. And super nice guys, but maybe questionable like culinary instincts. And they brought to this occasion, it's very hard to describe, and I wish I had a photo, because we had a photo of it that was going around. It's some kind of jellied pudding or ham, jellied ham. My wife thinks it's ham. I don't know if she wasn't there, but she's sure it was ham. In any case, it was in the shape of a rabbit. So if you can picture this jellied ham in the shape of a rabbit, it was, again, I want to stress, super nice guys. But one of the most disgusting things that any of us had seen, and of course, Dan is, no, it wasn't spam. It was on a level, worse than that. It looked like it came from hell, but again, so well intentioned. But Dan is, of course, like, saying, we're all talking about it. He's daring people to eat it, offering to pay people to eat it. Then we forget about it, because, there are other things besides the jellied ham in the shape of a bunny. And so we keep drinking, we're playing games, a lot of drinking. I think at this point now, Martin had already passed out. And it's time for bed. I go upstairs. My brother is sleeping downstairs on the couch. And all of a sudden, as I'm like brushing my teeth, I hear a kind of blood-curdling, slightly feminine scream. And I come down, and David is pale as a ghost. And I look over at Dan, and Dan is just, and I know you all know this thing that he would do, that kind of silent laughter, that just doubled over, like clutching, but not exactly making sounds because he's laughing too hard. David is like, he's shook up for the rest of the weekend. Dan had put the bunny, which we had all forgot about, in his sleeping bag, in the thing where his where you put your head, in the sleeping bag. Dan had put it there. And, when I think of Dan now, I kind of want to remember that image, Not the bunny, him laughing. That was him, he's so giving. The kindest soul, everyone has said it. You were right, David. So talented, but he'll never tell you that. And I'm gonna miss him so much. He's such a special person. Beautiful, beautiful soul. Rest in peace. Love you, Dan. Thank you.
That's one of my memories of Dan as well. With that, I think we're going to take a little break you want to say one more thing? Oh, we're going to do the movie after. We're going to take 30 minutes, so it's, what time is it now? 2:20. Let's resume about 2:50. If you want to have a couple drinks, just hang out for a bit. We're going to take a break.
One step beyond.
Distance. Dear Ketos, my friend, good day. Hoping you're keeping the best of health. How's the music down there in Boyard? I hear that Buzz have a sound system. And that Naya Keith is this jockey. But them can't get a red stripe beer for selling a dance at night. Tell Zaki, the high priest, who used to lead the toughest, one who could go, toughest. Give him my regards. Tell him, Prince Buster says, hello. If you should see Rashi, you know Rashi from Bahawal, give him my regards. And if you should see the two brothers, Stinky Pomulus and Kurban, we go together. Tell them, Prince Buster says, so long, sorry we had to go so soon. Since music is the food of love, I'll forever sing on. And Forest Azar will soon get back on ship. Goose dance. Goose dance.
I just had a love attack. Now my love life was nothing. In fact, it was a blank until you came along. Ooh-wee, you put a little tiger in my tail. Can't you see you got me helpless right now, baby? Lay down my bed. You got me down, 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 down from a love attack. I've had the mumps and the measles. Lord, I've had the whooping cough. I've been down with double pneumonia, but I was able to shake it off. But you came along and knocked me flat on my back. Now you got me suffering from a little love attack. Oh, me, I'm bad for you, babe. Baby, I fell for you just like a rock. When you turn on your love, I was so weak, I just couldn't stand the shock. You hit me just like lightning, knocked me out of my track. You got me down, baby.
Hey, quick, can everyone listen up for 1 sec? The taco truck is only here 30 more minutes. So get tacos immediately.
Hi, my name is Sax Paul. I just want to give you just all people in this crowd that we are family. And Dan's the man. Dan was my mentor. And I spent so many hours with him. And I'm always going to miss him, but he's here. He's in my soul. He's in my heart. And we need to keep playing ska music. Dan's in me. I'm talking. Dan's talking. Anyway, love you all. Sarah and I have to go. Much respect and much love. Love you, Dan. Love you. Love you all. Thank you for letting me just talk like a piece of shiitake mushroom.
Thank you. Get back to the tacos and the drinks.
so good. I'm at some movies, she don't seem to be that. And then she asks me, why don't I come to her flat and have some supper? And at the evening past 5, I'm taking records. This sounds a groovy high five. I say, yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah. My baby loves me, she gets me feeling so fine. When she loves me, she makes me know that she's mine. And when she kisses, I feel the fire get hot. She never misses, she gives it all that she's got. And when she asks me if everything is okay, I got my answer. The only thing I can say, I say yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah. We play a melody and turn the lights down low so the knock and see. We gotta do that, we gotta do that. We gotta do that, we gotta do that. And there'll be no one else alive in all the world except you and me. Yeah, 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 yeah. Pretty baby, I never knew you so. It's hard to tell you because I'm trembling so. But pretty baby, I want you all for my own. I'm ready. People's always alone. No need to ask me if everything is okay. I got my answer. The only thing I can say, I say yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah. Play a melody and turn the lights down low so the knock and see. We gotta do that, we gotta do that, yeah, yeah. We gotta do that, we gotta do that. And there'll be no one else alive in all the world except you and me. Yeah, 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 yeah. Pretty baby, I never knew such a thrill. I shall tell you because I'm trembling so. But pretty baby, I want you all for my own. I'm ready. Those always alone. No need to ask me if everything is okay. I got my answer. The only thing I can say, yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah. That's what I say, yeah, yeah.
it's important is because it's a 4-minute film. So if you blink, you're going to miss it. And it's of Dan when he was 11 years old until he was last year, I think his dad told me, in LA. So just everybody, just in 1 minute, we're going to start this film. The speaker is very small, so just be quiet, pay attention. You got 4 minutes just to keep your mouth shut.
So shall it be in the end? And bullshit is bullshit, it just goes by different names. So come on, boy, come on, girl, succumb to the beat, surrender. Come on, boy, come on, girl, succumb to the beat, surrender. All the things I shout about.
Okay, we got everybody's attention. Can we turn that music off in the back? Thank you. Okay. Okay, so you don't hear my voice anymore. As long as everybody's quiet, we're going to go ahead and start the film.
And you're beginning to feel the heat. Well, listen, Buster, you better start to move your feet to the rockin'est, rock steady beat of madness. One step beyond.
like that in a long time.
Eric Derenforth, I fucking love you.
All right, now we're going to do a little bit of an open mic. We're going to start with Dan's nephew, Nick. After Nick, if you want to just come up, I'm not going to introduce you. I may not know your name. So after Nick, if you just want to come up and say a few words, that would be great. Nick Boer.
I feel like he was my uncle, but he was also my teacher and my role model. And throughout my life, he was always teaching me to be kind, respectful, and work hard. That's it.
Well, after seeing that madness, Dan skanking to madness, I've got to tell my madness story from Dan. And it's got a few layers to it. So we were fortunate enough to play with Jimmy Cliff at Coachella. And luckily enough for us, Madness was playing also, and they had their RV or whatever across the way from us. So me, I'm very scared to talk to like famous people or whatever, but Dan was completely fearless and had no problem with it. So Madness came out of their trailer like looking like gods, and I was like, oh my God, look at him. Like, but Dan, no problem, when I was talking to him, and got me in it also to talk to them, because he's always was bringing me in and stuff, and that's the whole reason I got to play with Jimmy Cliff. Was like Dan had called me up one day and he's like, hey Liam, you want to play with Jimmy Cliff? I'm like, yeah, sure, who are we playing with? He's like, no, we're playing with Jimmy Cliff. I'm like, no, but like what band are we playing with? Like the opening band? Oh, Jimmy Cliff, we're playing with Jimmy Cliff. I was like, Jimmy Cliff? Like, so we got to play with Jimmy Cliff, and so we hung out with Madness, and the first weekend we hung out with Chaz Smash and went around in the little golf cart with him, and he was like reading like Cockney poetry to the bartenders, and like me and Dan are standing there with our beers and like, oh man, like this is amazing, like what's going on? And both drop our beers like at the exact same time because we were just like floored by it. So that was amazing. And then the next weekend, like Dan could, like what Rick was saying earlier, like get you into anything. So he's like, we're gonna go on stage with Madness and Skank. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So Dan, before he played, he's like, okay, we're gonna do these real tight skanks, like this. I'm like, okay, I've never skanked like that before, Dan, but yeah, I guess you're right. So go up on stage and like skanked with him, and Saxon like got me off with his sax. I'm like a sax player. I was like, oh my God, this is a dream. If I can ever find that bloody video of that, it would be like amazing. And then the next weekend we hung out with Suggs like too, and it was just amazing. But apart from that, like Dan basically saved my life like numerous times, like and was like, I feel like I gotta say something about his kindness now for the thing earlier, because he was incredibly kind. I stayed at his house. He'd always like cut up oranges and like bring out salsa, and like I don't want to eat, I'm feeling miserable, but he'd like make me eat, and like I don't know, I feel like if I could have been as good of a friend to him as he was to me, I just wished to have that opportunity. But the only thing I can do at this point is try and live my life like Dan did, and give such kindness to people, and
he drove me to the airport. He fucking built me raised beds, like kind of thing. Like, felt like, oh, like let me give you some money or something. Like, I felt like I was like taking advantage of this guy in a way, just with his kindness, and he got me in everything, dude. Like, I was like going through a divorce and like stayed at his house, and he's like, oh, let me see if 40 Radiation needs a sax player, and like called him up and like got me in on that, and like my life would not be anywhere near what it is without having him in my life, and also including me with the incredible people that he was. Like, I never felt like separate with all the people, like the Santa Barbara people and all that. Like, he would bring me into that world and made me feel included, even though I wasn't, part of that Santa Barbara, like, people, and knowing that, like, I never felt like separate from it, and I'm so blessed to have had the richness and pleasure that he's had. So, love you, Dan.
That was great, Liam. My name's Dino, and I play drums for Roddy Radiation, the Ska Billy Rebels. And Roddy wants me to speak. He just wrote something to me on Facebook last night. It's real quick. It just says, Dan was my friend. I stayed at his home many times and enjoyed his hospitality. He was great fun on the road and a brilliant musician who made me and the band sound like $1 million. I shall forever miss him. Love and peace, Dan. Roddy Byers. So my introduction to Dan Boer couldn't have come at a better time. I was with Roddy on the very first tour that he did over here, and the band was shit. I mean, it was a freaking nightmare. First off, the road manager is the one that sent emails and everything out, and she was like, you guys are gonna make this much, that, and it wasn't clicking. And we met her, and I found out she was just a fan, and I'm like, oh shit. I had to tell all my other bands that I was not going to do the tours with them because I was going to play with Roddy. And so we do that first tour, we get through it, and then my wife at the time says, how did it go? And I'm like, well, you've been to a couple shows. And she goes, well, I don't know. How is it on the road? And I go, it's a nightmare. So she goes, you know what we should do? We should go out and flyers for this next tour. And I'm like, old school punk, right? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So Dan is playing up in LA with, I don't remember who he's playing with, but they opened the show. We went up to the Slackers show up the Troubadour. So we're out there in front flying. Here comes Dan in his strut. And I hand him a flyer like this one right here. I go, hey man, this is, we're playing. And he takes about 10 feet, stops, and he goes, no way. Turns around and he goes, this really Roddy? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I want to play. He said, I play keyboards. And I go, okay. And he goes, hey man, I play with Jimmy Cliff. And I go, you do? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I could do this shit. I know all the special songs anyway. And I go, you do? And he goes, yeah. I'm not even in charge of the band. And I go, you got the gig. Right then and there, I just go, Dan, is that your name? And he goes, yeah. I go, welcome to the band, you got it. So I get home and I'm like, uh-oh, what did I just do? So Danny Dean is the one who got me in the band and stuff, and he had this other guy who played in that goofy Berlin. And I'm like, I don't think so. So I called Danny and I go, hey, you got to fire that guy. And he's like, what do you mean I got to fire him? And I go, you got to fire him. I got a different keyboard player for us. And he goes, what? What did you do? And I go, I don't give a shit. Either you fire that guy or I don't play drums. And he's like, who is this guy? And I told him, and he just so happened to have the Jimmy Cliff Rebirth record. He goes, this guy? And I go, yeah. And he goes, okay, cool. So, yeah, and so we started doing rehearsals, and we didn't have Zach and Liam yet, and I don't even remember who we had at that time, and Dan goes, hey, I got a friend, Zach, he played with me on the Jimmy Cliff tour, and I'm like, okay, and he goes, can he join the band too? And I'm like, I go, Dan, if they knew you, more the better. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. We'll call him, tell him he's in the band. And I'm like, okay, cool. A couple weeks later go by, he goes, hey, he goes, I got my friend Liam, he plays sax, and he's going through something with his woman. He goes, he's been staying in my house, and I told him I got to leave to go on tour, so would it be cool if he played sax in me? So I'm like, yeah, tell him. You know?
He split his pay with me.
Yeah.
He split his fucking pay with me.
What's that?
He split his pay with me.
Oh, yeah, I'm getting that. And yeah. So he goes, hey man, and I go, yeah, he goes, I'll pay him, don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, dude, that's not cool. You know, we'll make sure you guys all get paid. And he's like, no man, I want to pay him. He goes, because, you know, you guys are being cool. So that right there showed me, I mean, I played with a lot of different people. Mike Nass from Social Distortion, Jack Grisham from TSOL, and I was in a band called The Hangmen, and that was a band I was touring with a lot when I heard about this gig with Roddy. So there's a Hangmen UK, they're a psychobilly band. Found out later, Roddy thought I was a drummer for that band, but thank God when he came in the first rehearsal, he heard me play, and he goes, I love it, mate, you're fucking rocker. And I'm like, okay, and he goes, play songs just the way you're playing them, and everything's going to be cool. So that, and then when Dan got in the band, it just changed the dynamic of everything. And Dan is the most giving person I've ever met. And it's weird because he would know before, almost like before I would know, or he'd watch what he would do, he would have something for that person. You know, like the last tour, we all got sick and stuff. And Dan was like, in between sound check or whatever, he ran across to Walgreens or whatever and got all these immune busters. And he was basically like my nurse. And then he would know right away what my drums needed. If something happened, he'd fix it. If I needed my case fixed, he fixed it. I mean, he was more than just a brother. He was more than just a bandmate. He was probably my favorite person. Not only that I've been in a band with, because I've been in a band with a lot of assholes, but just as a human being, there was no one better than Dan. And I know he's in heaven right now. I know he is. And, you know, we had a lot of similar problems. I see a psychiatrist now, and, you know, so let's just all pray for Dan and know that he's in a better place right now, and let's have a good time in remembrance of Dan Boer to the dance floor. Thank you very much.
I'll just hold it. I'm Samantha, also known as Sam. I'm Jessica's best friend. And her journey with Dan was the beginning of my journey with Dan, a brother, sorry, a friend. I can just vividly see his ocean sky eyes and his smile and hear his laugh and his nod and his yeah. On the way over here, I was bumping really loud, a lot of reggae, a lot of dub. And I was just imagining him being like impressed when I rolled up and like, yeah. And I just had a son, Jessica's a mother, and obviously it's years later that we've all become these different people. And I've heard about Dan's parents and brother and sisters for a long time without having met them, and it's beautiful to look into your eyes and see his eyes and feel his presence. And yeah, I just thank you guys for bringing him into this world, parents, the creators. You know, you gifted all of us here with a really incredible human being that is deeply in our hearts, awake in our hearts. And I think, you know, when people leave us in this earthly realm, that that's how they continue to live, is through memory, telling people's stories, continuing to laugh. And Dan was just someone who was like nonstop laughs. I mean, me and Jan, he'd be cracking up. That was a combo of Jessica and Dan by mistake. He would be cracking up at that right now. We would just riff off of each other and it'd be just like so hysterical. Zach, I mean, I only have funny fucking memories of Dan. Like, he would just make me laugh. I mean, some of them are, they used to have like wild parties in their backyard, and which had a jacuzzi and all these like tropical flowers. And we were barbecuing and everyone, I mean, there'd be way too many people for the jacuzzi. And one time Dan was very drunk and threw watermelon into the jacuzzi and continued to do a cannonball into the jacuzzi. Yeah, and he kept taking it back out and throwing it back in and then doing cannonballs into the jacuzzi, which was like 3 feet deep. And then at any, you know, dance event or music event, he'd always like drop down into this dance move that we thought was very hysterical. And he would love to make me and Jess laugh because we all share Hawaii in common. A lot of my family is from Hawaii, and their backyard was very tropical, so he'd like take the sprinkler and like make it rain for us. And yeah, I just feel so deeply grateful to. Oh yeah, thank you. I was like thinking about all the things. He actually taught me about YouTube. I remember like distinctly, he was like, oh yeah, like you should, you know, go on YouTube, you'll find a lot of cool music, because we also shared reggae in common, and I was getting really into soul back then. And I was like, okay, cool. And I remember going home and being like, didn't understand that it was Y-O-U, and typing in U-T-U-B-E. And then I like went back and I was like, Dan, I couldn't find, he's like, no, it's like Y-O-U. But anyways, I have nothing but gorgeous memories. I can see him, I can feel him, I can hear him, and I know he's all part of us. And it's so cool seeing just everyone and like how he marked all of us, and how true and just an incredible human being. So whatever you guys did to raise him and nurture him, thank you, because he's an epic human being, so thank you.
I'm very short, I'm sorry. Hello. My name is Fritz. I play in a band called the Steady 45s. Dan blessed us by helping us back Jamaican legends. And it's very scary backing Jamaican legends. Very stressful. So stressful. Dan came in as an anchor for all of us and kept us all honest and true as far as what we were playing and why we were playing it. It's difficult to even comprehend what it is to make music together and everything. And we're a younger generation. He always gave us respect that we obviously didn't deserve. And taught us a lot. It's going to be short. I just want to say on behalf of the entire Rocksteady and Los Angeles ska scene, we love Dan. We love Dan. We'll always love Dan. We're going to pull all this back and, thank you guys. That's all.
Hi. I think it's important for a woman to stand up here that's known Dan since she was 12 years old and speak to his character of what it was like to know somebody like your son and your brother growing up in this whole scene. I met Dan through my older brother Jared, and I'm part of the Dynamic Pressure music family. Dan was always the most respectful, hilarious, safe space in every event that we had. And I'm going to keep it very short, but I just feel like I need to say that I feel so lucky and blessed to be in the circle of friends and all of these men that I grew up with. That, Martin, you spoke a little bit to some of the women that came forth, and your brother stepped into place every single time that it was necessary. He was such a man of character, and it will continue to be just so inspiring for all of me and my girlfriends. Every single one of my girlfriends, when we talk about Dan, we're like, oh, Dan, we had such a crush on Dan. And I'll tell a little funny story that I talked about already, but in high school, we had a little system of numbers for these men that we had crushes on, and Dan was one of them. And his number was number 11 because of his two little skinny legs and his peg pants, rude boy pants. And so we could talk freely about him in our notes to each other back and forth, I saw number 11 in the hallway. And there's some other numbers here today too, but I don't want to get into those. But Dan was number 11. And I have nothing but just admiration and love for your son, and I just feel so lucky to have grown up in this family of musicians and so many that are here. And I just wanted to speak for the women whose lives that he touched like mine at a very young, impressionable age, and that's it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jesse. This is my buddy Jay. We came from a band called the Agrolites. Before the Agrolites, Jay was in a band called the Vessels, and I was in a band called the Rhythm Doctors. That's how the Agrolites formed, because we were inspired by two bands. One was Hepcat, and the other one was Dynamic Pressure. Now, with that being said, Dynamic Pressure was the one band doing what nobody else was doing. Out of Santa Barbara, but they were playing the skinhead reggae, instrumental, right? And with that, also, because all the bands were playing ska at the time, but that was the one band that was doing something different. So, we were fortunate enough to record our first album called Dirty Reggae, and we had Dan Boer play organ on that album. He wrote a lot of the songs with us, because we would just do things off the cuff. It would just be rhythms.
wasn't even a band. It wasn't even a band yet. It was just a jam session.
It was a jam. Yeah, we didn't know it was.
Into a band.
We got Dion Watts here, wherever he is. Dion. Yep.
Tall Paul. There's Tall Paul was big.
Tall Paul was one of the founders with that, but yeah, it wasn't even a band yet. We were just we had the keys to a studio, and we get to record there at night after hours, right? Like 2 in the morning.
We'd have to work around like Phil Collins equipment, yeah.
And the cool thing about the studio was it was Mo West when they moved from Detroit to L.A. But anyways, Dan Boer, I'll never forget this moment. I was talking to Jay about this earlier. There was always this certain sound with the skinhead reggae, early reggae thing, that a guy named Winston Wright did. And he had this like chimey organ sound, right? But none of us knew. None of us knew what it was. We wanted it. We wanted it, right? So I remember going to the studio and Dan coming out and going, hey, there's a thrift store down the street. You got a pickup truck? Let's go. We're getting
I think Zach and Jubes were involved too.
Yeah, Jubal was there. Yeah, Jubes, where's Jubal? But yes, so we go to the thrift store, and Dan talks to the lady and starts, haggling or whatever, and it's like, oh, this thing, and she plugs it in. I don't know, this thing's been sitting here for like weeks. He plugs it in, it doesn't work. And he looks at me like, winks, like, well, what do you want for it? And the lady's like, nah, just take it. Get it out of here. So we load it up in the truck. We bring it back to the studio. Dan sets it up. Brian, our old guitar player, mics it up. Everything gets set up. And Dan unscrews the back of the organ and pulls off the big cardboard thing and goes down there and looks at all the tubes and all of a sudden pulls this penny out. Puts a penny down, screws it in, turns the organ on, and it goes, and it's all of a sudden that Winston Wright sound that we've been wanting forever. Remember that, Paul? So Dan was the founder of the Lowry organ, which was the big secret weapon for years, because nobody knew what a Lowry was. But it wasn't for people like Dan Boer, who was very innovative, very creative, and genius, like beyond far genius. Studied, learned, and knew. Knew his reggae, knew everything.
All the Moog stuff too. Nobody was doing Moog instrumentals, but Dan brought that,
Dan brought everything to the table. Yeah, he did. So it's been an honor to know Dan throughout that time and have the honor to play with Dan and be inspired by Dan, Zach, Jubal, Dynamic Pressure, but big respect to Dan Boer. God bless you guys. Cheers.
Missionaries, man. Missionaries for an unheard music and a misunderstood music, an overly commercialized music. Missionaries for the roots. Missionaries for the roots of Jamaican music, the roots of Lost Soul Records, the roots of early ska. That's what I think of when I think of Dan Boer. He and I worked at a record shop in Santa Barbara in our hometown called Just Play Music. It was owned by this crazy British guy who knew his shit. And he wasn't the best businessman, but he could smell the kids in town. He could sniff out, I will hand it to him, that he could sniff out the kids in our little beach town that were passionate about music. Whether we were good at doing our job or not was another story, but we love music, and that's one thing I'll say about that record shop. It was staffed by Zach Pike, Dan Boer, myself, a bunch of other great people that just loved music. And we did our best, and we had a music shop in Santa Barbara, California on the main drag, and it taught a lot of people in our hometown about the love of music that I think we can all share. And I will say the one thing about having to have the opportunity to work with Dan and Zach is that these guys were missionaries for an unheard music, and I think we all have to respect that in our lives. We take it for granted when we discover punk rock. We take it for granted when we discover early hip hop. We take it for granted when we discover all this stuff. But there's usually someone there who showed us the fucking secret passageway, the portal, and then it just ignites your imagination, and you start
collecting records. I remember like going to get my paycheck, and the owner would be like, "Yeah, there's no money." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You put all the records you wanted in your little box, and that's what your paycheck is." So I was like, quickly I figured out, I was like, this is like the alcoholic that gets a job as a bartender. This isn't the job you're going to get if you want to make money, because it's like an addiction. The more you learn about music, the more you're hanging out with these people that have this like just magnetic soul. You just want to, you can't get enough. You can't get enough. And you know, to that point, like, working with those guys, I didn't even put it together at first that those guys were the guys from Dynamic Pressure. I'd been in the music community in Santa Barbara for years, playing in bands, and we heard about Dynamic Pressure, but we were a couple years older than those guys, and we heard about it in a way that sort of had this, they attained this like mythical vibe, where you heard about it, but you couldn't believe it was actually from Santa Barbara. Like, we knew we grew up with like Crucial DBC and the Upbeat. There was a lot of that heritage in our hometown, but like Dynamic Pressure, it seemed like something from another planet. It didn't seem like something from the Mesa, you know? These guys didn't eat Dino's pizza. These guys were probably fucking from England or some shit. And then I found out those were the guys from the band, and as we got to know each other little by little, you know, and then we all went on with our lives, and the wind blew us into different places, you know. Turns out, you know, I moved down to LA. Eventually I found out recently that Dan lived like a couple exits away from me. And I'd be like in Vegas for some reason, punk rock bowling or whatever the fuck, and I'd see like Roy Ellis play, and I'd look up and I'd be like, is that fucking Dan on the keyboards? You know, I'd be at like a dub club or some shit and be like, is that Zach up there playing guitar? Like you hear someone killing it and you look up and you're like, it's the guy from my hometown. Hell yeah, you know? And that's the thing about being from Santa Barbara. Who's here from Santa Barbara? Like, we're family, man. It's like, it's a small town dressed up as a city, but like, we got each other's backs. We might not have met each other in person, but if we ever saw each other, we have that immediate connection. That's the thing about growing up in Santa Barbara. It's something special, and I've traveled all over the world, and you run into people, and you have a connection to Santa Barbara. I was on the fucking 311 cruise, and I run into this guy from the Agrolites, and immediately he tells me that, and I'm like, the Agrolites, I'm like fanboying out, like, they're such a fucking great band. He's like, yeah, dude, you know who our favorite band ever was? Dynamic Pressure. And I'm like, dude, I find myself like, I'm a professional, I'm a grown man, and I'm bragging that I went to fucking elementary school with Jubal Molitor. And someone's buying me a drink because of that. You know what I mean? Santa Barbara, man, it's fucking magic. And anyway, I'll cut it short. I just wanted to express myself and express my deep sorrow for losing such a star. You know, this guy was a fucking star, and I just was always proud. You know, I'd find out that, like, you know, I'd meet like Tim from Rancid. He'd be like, "Yo, man, you know Dan Boer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I used to work at a record store with him." You know, and somehow I felt cool just because I could somehow connect myself to this guy. He was such a cool person, such a good guy, and just the kind of person that just makes you want to, and I wasn't like a close friend of his, you know, I was a guy that worked with him for a while and knew him as an acquaintance, but just the kind of guy that when you get exposed to him, it somehow just makes you want to be a better version of yourself. It somehow just makes you want to check yourself. You're like, dude, am I being the kind of guy that would do the kind of thing that a guy like that would do? And, you know? And it's just rad. Like, it makes you want to get rad. It makes you want to be good. It makes you want to be better. It makes you want to try harder. And it makes you want to be generous. And those people, I mean, I'm not like some religious person or anything, but I think that's what people mean when they talk about angels. You know, the kinds of people that walk among us that just make us want to be a better version of ourselves and like keep it in perspective. Because we get caught up in all the media and all the rat race and all the traffic and all the whatever, money and shit that goes on. And you look at a guy like that and you go, no one up here is saying, oh, that guy's rad because he made a lot of money. That guy's rad because he took advantage of a lot of shit. That guy's rad because he, you know,
outran a lot of other people. They're all saying that guy's rad because he's a sweetheart, and because he's legit, and because he's good, and because he just was compelled to do better. And that's a cool thing, I think, for all of us to but I've had way too many friends die young. And so the gift that they give us without knowing it is they give us lessons, and we should learn those lessons because we're still here, and we're not going to be here forever. But while we're here, let's try to take a little something and go, hey, what would that guy do? What would that guy say? If that guy's looking at me right now, would he be like, bro? Or would he be like, no? So anyways, Dan. Damn, dude. Why did he have to go so soon? But here we are, and respect.
I think we're going to wrap up the ceremony. Martin is going to say a few thank yous. The one person he's probably not going to thank is himself, and I just want to say behind the scenes how much Martin has done to make this day happen. And if you're wondering why the speeches were so beautiful and moving and fantastic, it's because there couldn't be a better canvas for a tribute than Daniel. And I just want to say to Martin, Vanessa, Louise, and Fritz, we're all here for you and we all love you. And thank you so much. Martin.
Thank you, David. So we've had 4 hours now. We probably could have spent a lot more time, and we're going to do a lot more things going forward for Dan. So we do need to leave here by 5. So we have an hour for those who volunteered to help us clean up. So if you want to help, please. But we have to be gone in 1 hour. Tomorrow in Santa Barbara, there's going to be a cremation on the water for those people. There's going to be a memorial on the beach in Santa Barbara tomorrow morning. For those of people, sorry, it's been a long day, and I'm on East Coast time. Right, so if you want to find out more, please reach out to Zach Pike or to Jubal. I want to thank a few people, but we do have a website, so please keep going there, put memories, send us your photos. There's plans to make a book for Dan about his art. We want to keep his memory going. So you're all really creative people, so music, art, whatever you can think of, let's keep it going for Dan. Now we just want to thank a few people before I stop talking to you. Alfredo Peralta, who supplied the sound system, the projector, and he organized the live stream. So Alfredo, thank you so much. Bo Johnson, in alphabetical order, for printing the programs and for just all the moral support the last couple of weeks. We really couldn't have done it without you. Blaine and Nicole Rucker of Bakery Fat and Flour at Grand Central Market for donating cookies. My incredible brother-in-law, Darren Pasemko, who made the website, who made the program, the poster design. Devin Lester and the crew at Cafe Nido for hosting us here today. Wonderful place. The Hive crew that rolled up, but also brought a whole taco feast and meal for so many of us. It was wonderful. Thank you. For the flowers and the succulents and the floral arrangements, we want to thank Jessica and Samantha and Alla and Vin and Jay and Nikki Bonner. And then Michael Thompson, Vinlung, and Ray Melvid for just lots of overall help, great support, and all your advice. None of us live anymore in California, so we really appreciated helping with all this. I'm almost finished. The many volunteers today who helped with donating food and drinks and setting up and then helping us also close it down. A huge thank you to Dave Summers, who is Dan's nephew, for being a master of ceremonies. And then all the speakers, of course, but there's also Dan's really tight crew of dear friends who all rushed to Eagle Rock 1 month ago when we were at our lowest point. So thank you so much. And you came from Hawaii, you came from Santa Barbara, so a big mahalo to Bo, Diego, Jared, Jessica, Jet, Jubal, Liam, Mark, Nick, and my brother Zach Pike for being there for us. So thank you all. please join me in a virtual toast for Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Fellows, girl, and I'm so proud, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of being loved by you. And it would hurt